So this is, of course, I always say one of my favorite kinds of episodes where you get to do doctor speak with another like-minded physician. So like you, Dr. Sophocles is in clinical practice. She's gone for extensive training. She's written books. She counsels companies. She's about to go on a book tour with her book Good in Bed that's coming out February 10th. She's making a documentary. They're just this is one of the episodes where I feel like we could have had a weekend sleepover and still be talking.
That's so absolutely true. Look, I feel like I've grown up with Dr. Sophocles. She's amazing. She's just following so many incredible paths, and these are groundbreaking things she's doing. And I like the way she found her own niche in the menopause space that is super important for women. Let's talk to Dr. Sophocles. Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun-Sherrill. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so excited to have our guest today, Dr. Maria Sophocles, who's a gynecologist, a women's health advocate, a menopause problem solver, an author, a documentarian, and a clinician, in addition to many other hats that you wear. Welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. So great to be here. You both are pretty awesome in my eyes too. So
Where do we
fangirling.
where do we possibly begin with you? There's just so many different avenues we can pursue here. Why don't we just start with your clinical practice? Because you and I have that in common, and I'm just curious where that is and how you have
Yeah.
time to do all these different things.
Well, I love clinical practice. You and I are sort of the same vintage. And
Yes,
in fact, I knew you when we were really, I mean, we're still young, but when we were really young,
when we
When
were
we were
babes,
younger.
when we were
babies.
babies, toddlers in residency. And I do not really want to stop that fully because I think it connects me to my other roles in terms of being I think I'm a better board of directors member and a better advisor to startups and a better health policy advisor if I can say, here's what women want now, or here's what I'm still seeing as problems to overcome. So I built a rather large GYN practice in Princeton, New Jersey, almost 20 years ago. That practice served about 30,000 women from the region. Because there was no OB, it was very, in some ways, ahead of its time because it was menopause focused. It focused on pediatric and adolescent GYN, cancer survivorship, urogynecology, things that regular OB/GYN practices didn't have time to do well.
Yeah.
And it kind of exploded and it really became over the last few years just too big and too much for me to manage. And I started wanting to have time with patients, more time. I wanted the luxury of an hour visit or a 90-minute visit. So I hired a bunch of clinicians and um, just this month am gifting that entire practice to a healthcare system. And I looked into selling it, but I didn't like the way a lot of the private equity backed companies, what they wanted. They said, no problem, we'll take visits from 15 minutes to 5 and we'll make more money. And you and I know 15
Oh,
is impossible to do a
yeah.
menopause with. So they were very profit focused. And I just felt like I built a reputation as someone who listened and really cared, and that I'd be really selling out the value and the quality to my patients, and I just didn't want to do that. So I found a healthcare system that said, no problem, we'll keep the same space and location so patients feel comfortable. We'll bring in some new clinicians and we'll try our best to take insurance, but still uphold your values. That was worth a lot to me. That's how I sleep well at night. So that's happening now. And what I've started is I guess I hate the word concierge, but is a much smaller bespoke practice of my own. I am licensed in 11 states. So
Yep.
that way I can care for women in California, Texas, Florida, Utah,
Yeah.
Colorado, whatever, a bunch of states, Massachusetts. So, but I can do that virtually and then still see patients in person. The in-person stuff is so lovely because you're still knee to knee with
Oh,
them and
yeah.
talk to
I
them.
agree.
And then I think you know this, Alyssa. I brought a technology to America about 10 years ago, a laser that regenerates vaginal tissue. And because I pioneered that, people still like to come have me do that
Of
treatment. So that
course.
way I can have them do Mona Lisa in my office. So that's what I'm doing clinically. And that's maybe 8 or 10 days a month.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, I'm really focusing on getting this documentary film filmed and produced and
Well,
edited,
tell
which
us a
I
little bit
love.
about that. What is the name of it?
Yeah.
What is the purpose for it?
Yeah, the purpose is sort of an extension of my TED Talk. So my TED Talk looked at the sexual fallout of menopause, what happens to sex as we age. And the reason the TED family liked that topic, because I called TED and said, someone's got to talk about menopause, and I have all this stuff to tell you. And they said, nope, we don't want a doctor just talking about menopause. But the sexual fallout is universal. And they said that's a message that the 500 million heading towards a billion menopausal women probably aren't getting to talk about,
You
whether
were
they're,
ahead of your time with this, Maria. Honestly, menopause now is being talked about in every single cocktail party,
yeah, yeah,
everywhere,
I mean, you
everywhere,
and
yes,
I,
everywhere.
you're still at JP Morgan. I was there
yeah,
this week.
it
Um,
was huge, right?
yeah, and you would think that you wouldn't know that 5 years ago there was literally nothing at JP Morgan focused on women's health, and you
Oh,
and I
yeah,
were on roller skates going to 12 events a day,
that's
talking to different
right.
people.
That's right. And anyway, I picked the sexual fallout because I felt it was the most shameful. I felt
Yeah.
and here's a statistic I find crazy. 69% of women have never had a conversation with a clinician about anything sexual. Not their OBGYN, not their insurance. That's like
It's
what,
fascinating that you say that
77%.
because when I was launching my first company in this space
Yeah.
in 2008, 2009, 2010, the statistic we used that was just as disturbing is only 3 to 5% of gynecologists and obstetricians brought up the topic
Yeah.
of
Right. That's
sexual
the flip
enjoyment,
side. That's
sexual
even
pain,
more
sexual
depressing.
pleasure. Yeah,
And I
right.
feel like I have an absolutely skewed view because these words about sexual health come off out of my mouth literally 20 times a day. And I just never imagine that anybody is going to still feel shy or ashamed or kind of deer in the headlights about this conversation. So kudos.
But
Yeah.
Alyssa, you are at the far end of the clinician spectrum. You are an exception. You are, I mean, I think you're an amazing clinician,
Thank
but
you.
and I think most doctors mean well and their
Oh,
heart is
sure.
to be a good clinician. But remember, to defend the clinicians, they weren't trained in
I
sexual
know.
health. That
Right.
wasn't part of our training. Even in OB/GYN residency, we didn't get much training in
We
sexual health.
got none.
You and I had to go to ISSWISH and learn
Learn on our own.
and
Yeah.
kind of go, "Oh my God, really? We can talk about that?" And then learn how to phrase things in a way that was culturally sensitive. And remember, there's a lot of shame and stigma around sex. Our country is, as we all know, very different state to state, region to
Mhm.
region. And there are an enormous number of states and therefore populations that are still very loath to have sex as a public topic. They promote abstinence for sex ed, for
And
Yeah.
example,
that's
instead
terrifying
of
to me
birth
that
control.
the statistic that we teach abstinence in
Yeah.
more states than we teach consent.
Yes, that's insane. And so, if only of the, and this is in my book, The Bedroom Gap, we talk about how if we want to have healthier sexual relationships, we have to start early. We have to upend and renovate sex ed in our country for young people so that they
Mm.
can focus on pleasure and safety and consent and not fear. And I think the three of us, I'm sure we agree on that. I mean,
So you
three
had mentioned the
states only
book,
teach that.
Good in
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bed. Tell us a little about that. It's
Yeah.
coming out soon, so we're very excited for that and for the launch. And
Yeah, that's
hopefully this
soon.
podcast will drop around the same time and
Yeah.
support that message. But talk a little bit about the process of writing the book
Oops.
and where you are now, when it will be available to the world, and what your objective was for it.
Right. So I had known like 10 years ago, someone has to write a book about menopause. There's only these old things out there. And I kind of started to write it, and it just felt boring. Like I know people can figure this out. I was shocked that we needed one. And then menopause kind of woke up, and all my
Yeah.
peers started writing the same menopause book. You and I have seen a dozen of them come out. And I started feeling like, God, the shelf just doesn't need one more like that. And there's nothing better about what I know about menopause than Mary Claire Haver or Jessica Shepard or Tamsin Fadal. They all did a great job. And so I just said, you know what? I want to write about what women might privately want to understand, which is two things: how they can reinvigorate their sex life if it's dull. Because, Alyssa, we get women all the time saying, I have no desire or
Right.
it hurts. So I thought I'd do that. And then I thought, well, that's just kind of a how to. I want to explore why. Why do women have shame? Why do they come into our offices and say, I feel broken, or there's something wrong with me, or I have to have sex for him? Men have needs. If I hear that one
Yes.
more time, I'm going to pull my hair out. Why, what society are we living in this 2026, where we still feel that, where women still feel guilty if they don't give sex to men? So the book is actually a bigger, deeper look at the forces that shape who we are sexually, how we came to feel that. So we look at history, 4,000 years of history, patriarchy, the concept of patriarchy, why that's still pervasive, even in educated, uh, progressive women. Um, History, culture, patriarchy, um, big porn, I call it. What's the effect of porn? Why is porn still affecting how nice men and women have sex? The effect of big pharma, right? Why did the development of Viagra, which was rushed through
Yeah.
the FDA, why was that so different from the development of Addyi, the first FDA approved pill for women with sexual
Right.
desire? Why the double standard? So, in a way, it's a look at the gendered healthcare gap. It's a way of looking at who we are sexually and why we can shed some of these tropes. So, it's kind of a broad look with plenty of evidence-based, detailed tips and hacks on the benefits of vaginal estrogen and how to do internet dating and how to have sex if you're a cancer survivor or you have chronic disease. So it's a little bit of how come and a little bit of how to. So
I absolutely love this. Number one, because like you said, there's nothing boring about this. This is the why, which is what everybody wants to know. In doing your research for the book and in practice, do you feel like we've actually come a long way? Or is there just so much more work to be done? Because I would like to think that after these 5 or 10 years, and now with menopause all over the map, have we made improvements? Because to your point, practitioners didn't want to discuss sexual health with their patients because they really had no answers. They didn't know what they were going to do with some of the
right.
complaints and concerns. Has this changed significantly?
I think there's a yes and no in your answer, unfortunately. And the book talks about this, how what has changed is menopause is having this great awakening, and it is dragging sexual health up with it. Thank
Mhm.
goodness. So we know when we go to conferences or JP Morgan that that there's also money interest, research interest, and lots of women who are saying, I want to be a founder. I want to found a menopause company. And some of those women are are saying, I want to look at sexual health. I want to make a better vibrator. I want to make lube that's more organic. I want to get the message out there that sexual health is for everyone. So that's all happening, and that's great. Is it democratized yet? No, it's
Mhm.
mostly hitting women like you and I in our feeds, going, "Oh, cool! Look at that! A new lube and a vibrator at one." And one of my favorite products is actually a bedside candle because I love scented candles. You light it and it melts, and when it's melted, it's play oil. So I'm like, oh, great, So there's all kinds of fun stuff coming out for those of us who get that feed and can afford to spend $45 on a silly candle. So I don't really think there's democratization. I don't think the women
Okay.
in inner city clinics are getting asked about their sexual health. They're still just getting prescribed the bare basics. But so again, mixed answer, mixed blessing. And I think, as I mentioned before, sex ed in this country is still woefully disproportionately old-fashioned and out of balance. And the fact that only 3 states out of 50 teach progressive sex ed, including things about LGBTQ health, um, consent is really big, and just so many things in those 3 states are
Yeah.
exactly where we should be. But 3 out of 50, I would give that a D minus at
Yeah.
best.
And one of the things you and I discussed when we saw each other is 30 plus states require sex ed, and half of them don't require it to be medically accurate. And we repeat
Yep.
this over and over
Right.
again,
We
no
do.
matter what group of people that I'm in. People are literally stunned that we require education and don't require it to be accurate. I can't think of any other field.
Yes.
Would you teach about World War II and get the countries that were involved wrong? I just can't see that happening. And you had mentioned also about, has it been democratized? We all, we spent now we're in our fourth decade of a world with Viagra. And there were periods
Right.
of time, in addition to it being rushed through the FDA, there were periods of time where Viagra was covered by insurance and oral contraception wasn't.
In
So
Japan, it's still like that, in Japan.
it's
Wow.
So it's crazy. And Viagra was allowed to not only pass quickly, but our community, our society said, and Pfizer figured this out and made even more money. First, we'll make it for a disease, and we'll change the name of that disease to erectile dysfunction, which sounds more clinical, less shameful than impotence, which just is
which
shameful.
is brilliant
Yeah.
Brilliant
communication.
marketing, brilliant marketing. But I guess to me, the important point here is not just that sex ed needs to be changed for 15 to 20-year-olds, but that medical education is also woefully behind. My friend and colleague Wen Shen, who was my mentor when I trained in Baltimore, said has she runs the menopause clinic in Hopkins, and she did a study, I think it was 2012, looking at how poorly trained it, all med students and internists and OBGYNs were. And then another study came out 10 years later, and there was almost no improvement. So until we can get menopause and sexual health training for medical students, basic medical students, and then OBGYNs and internists, and then finally a little bit for every clinician. We're not going to have clinicians feeling comfortable. Remember, clinicians bring their own awkwardness into an
Oh,
exam room.
yeah.
So if you were raised in some strict family where nobody talked about sex and you even think the word vagina is kind of squeamish, you are going to hope to God your patients don't bring it up because you don't have anything to tell them and you kind of don't want to talk about it yourself. As one
We
doctor told me, I can't even talk about sex with my wife very well. How am I going to talk to my patients about it?
we
I
Oh
used to
was,
gosh.
refer to it
I
as the
know.
hand on the door. The doctors who didn't want to talk
Yes.
about it, their hands
Yes.
on the door, and the patient says, "Doc, I'm having some pain upon whatever
Oh no,
penetration or
it's
something,"
it's the
and
by
they're
the
like,
way.
"Ugh, I almost escaped. I
But
almost escaped."
So here's today's hot flash. Despite the rise of sex positivity, a recent survey of 3,000 adults found that 2 in 3 women are doing things during sex that they don't actually enjoy. I
yes,
have a question for you as you mentioned democratization. The porn industry, of course, is
male
absolutely
run.
booming.
Yep.
Have you found in your research, especially for the book and the documentary, that this is being democratized for women? Because I'm not necessarily appreciating that in my clinical practice. And I don't know if that's still something that women are not going to talk about with their physician or anybody else for that matter.
Yeah, so 2 comments. One, the word porn makes most women cringe. So as long as
Yes.
we keep just calling it porn, most of my patients go like this and say, not interested, don't want to talk. So I've tried to develop different terms so
Yes,
I
I
can
use
at least
erotica,
erotica. That's the best.
romantic, something, a 50 Shades
Right.
of Grey type of thing, but
Yes,
I'm
I do the
hopefully get
same,
my gist.
but yes, but I think there is motion in the right direction. It's just still a tiny fraction.
Yeah.
Porn is still massively owned by male-owned companies that film porn through the male lens. So
Mhm.
most of what most people, men and women, see is rather either degrading or male fantasy based or
Yeah.
male objective, have an orgasm, ejaculate, fall asleep based. But there are great directors out there. The most famous one is Erica Lust. She did a great TED Talk in Athens. If you want to Google Erica Lust TED Talk, just talking about the fact that the porn industry is so imbalanced, but that we need more female directed porn. We need more female rights for porn stars. Well, you're a Dookie, I'm a Dookie. Everyone here's got Duke connection. So let me just tip my hat to a Duke student who's now graduated, who was a an actress in the adult entertainment industry, and that's how she put herself through
And she
Duke,
got all kinds of attention, positive and negative.
positive and
Wow.
negative. But
Hmm.
one of the things she was demanding was increased exposure to this to say, women who are working in this industry should not be shamed. In fact, they should be, we should praise them for having to figure out how they can make a living, and we should make sure they have good health care and all kinds of stuff. So the industry itself is still massively male oriented. But what I do for my patients is I ease them into it. I say, you don't have to look at video. You can get erotica into your brain by reading, right? We call
Yeah.
that bibliotherapy. That's why
Yep.
the
That's
trashy
one of my
beach
favorite
novel is a
marketing.
real thing. Yeah, but also from listening. And I call this oral sex, AURAL, oral
Yeah.
sex. And one of the apps I like a lot is called Quinn, and it
Yeah.
allows women to indulge in fantasy, which most women feel is just way too impractical. I'm too busy. I don't have time for this. And I tell them, put some headphones on, climb in bed 10 minutes early, and just find a story.
Yeah.
The guy riding on horseback, the teacher, the whatever,
Oh.
the vampire, whatever's your fantasy, and or even just a story of a man and a woman who meet at a bar, whatever
Yeah.
takes you somewhere where erotic content goes into the brain. You will store that, and then when you put your head on your partner's shoulder, the brain kind of activates, right? And you kind of feel more like you could initiate or you could
This
have sex, right?
absolutely brings me back to a mutual mentor of ours, Susan Lee,
Hmm.
who used to say, when you read these things, you get sex on the brain. That's what we're looking for, sex on the brain. So
It's
thank you
true.
for that
It's
reminder.
true. I love that sex on the brain phrase
Yeah,
because it's kind of cute and
absolutely.
whimsical. And it's what women might really want. But again, our society kind of says, well, nice girls don't do that. And even if we're 50 or 60 years old, we harbor a little bit of that, right? And
So,
whereas men in our society are allowed, I mean, masturbation's treated as a normal part of being a young boy and a teenager. Masturbation for women's always been like this don't ask, don't tell policy, don't touch, don't say the word. So I think we have a long way to go to correct that still.
so I'm curious, as you said, you're both of the same vintage, and I've made this comment many, many times that every time I hear Alyssa, and as I'm getting to know you, hear you speak about how you interact with patients, people listen and say, why couldn't my doctor be like that? They're listening, they get it, they're looking at me as a total person, whether or not they know how much extra training you've gotten to be a certified menopause specialist. So what was it in your training or in your background that made you feel comfortable going in this direction? Because it's not, you don't just have to be comfortable with the medicine. And you've seen
No.
that there. I wish every doctor was comfortable with this, and I think it would mean a lot better patient care for women. But what was sort of your aha where, given when you were trained, several decades ago, that you said, this is for me. I get this. There's a bigger conversation. There's more to her needs. And I want to think about this on a much broader plane.
Hmm. I mean, you honestly articulated it for me so beautiful, Rachel, and that's really what it was. It was that I started seeing, like, I knew how to deliver a baby and I knew how to do surgery. And Alyssa will tell you these can be complex and challenging, but it's also a recipe. And I started feeling so much from the menopause patients that they weren't just suffering because they had a hot flash. It wasn't just a physical thing. They were feeling dismissed by the medical system and even dismissed societally. And I think that kind of bothered me. It started bothering me more than I think I'm also curious and restless and I get bored easily. And I
But
started
how
being
old were you? Where were you in your life's
I
journey?
was in my 40s. I was in my 40s. I wasn't necessarily having the symptoms, but my patients were getting older, so their needs were changing. And
Mm,
suddenly the young patients, it was like, okay, I can do that. I can give you the birth control pill. Or even the patients who needed surgery, I know how to do that. I can do the surgery. But I think it was finding my own deficiency, right? And feeling like, where am I deficient? Well, I'm deficient in good menopause training. So I went to the Menopause Society. We used to call it NAMS. Okay, I got this now. I got certified. I can help menopausal women. But the sexual fallout was really not even, remember, Alyssa, initially, NAMS didn't
yeah,
really even touch that
no,
in the
not at
beginning.
all. It was
And
separate.
so I think Alyssa and I share this kind of
Yeah.
relentless curiosity or need to keep getting better. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for you, but I've
Oh
always felt
no,
that about you, that you
thank you.
you just would always find what could I do better here and how do I do that? And you, Michael Critchman, and I have had these kind of conversations where it's like,
Yeah,
nope, we got to keep going, we got to get better. And I think sex was sort of this last frontier in a way. And now we have new challenges, right? How do we master AI? How do we use AI to make patient visits better or to get outcomes and collect massive amounts of data? There's
yeah,
such new challenges. And Rachel and I saw this week in San Francisco, this is like a new frontier. But 10 years
absolutely.
ago, for us, for Alyssa and I, it was sort of like, oh my gosh, we actually didn't get a lot of this, or maybe we just didn't feel comfy enough. So I think I know for myself, that was sort of there wasn't a one moment, but maybe there was one patient, I just can't remember, who kind of her pain and suffering and the sadness of, I've had patients lose their marriage
Yeah,
over the sexual fallout. I've had many patients whose husbands have gone and had affairs with younger women, or more commonly than I care to really admit, found help with prostitutes, just lovely, upstanding men in our society whose wives could not have sex, would not have sex anymore. And then they found not really a version of infidelity that involved payment for sex. And I started feeling like this is relationship wrecking. This is marriage wrecking stuff. And this needs, I need to be someone that they can go through this with. So maybe it was
yeah.
just a desire for a career pivot a little bit to serve people that were really undergoing horrible things.
I'm
Um,
so curious because after all, this is the business of the V.
yep.
You are one of those amazing doctors who literally is you're a physician brand. You're your own brand. Did you envision that this would happen? And where are you taking it? What's your favorite part of it? And I hope this question makes sense, but a
Yeah.
physician as a brand is something amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to hear a little about that in your mind.
Sure. That's a great, well, I will confess right now that I'm not, and I told Rachel this kind of confidentially, but it's okay that one of my weak spots is that I do love giving stuff away for free. I am not good at monetizing. So I'm going to have lunch with you guys and you can be my mentors and help me figure that out.
Well, that would be
But
Rachel's job.
Rachel will help me figure that out. Yeah. But yeah, you can stay my clinical colleague. Rachel can, I need a mentor. But I do love, I'm trying to find at my age what I love, what brings me joy. And really, what brings me joy is the public speaking act, is being on a stage with a microphone. It was very challenging for me to do a talk at TED because they insist you stay on that damn red circle. And I'm a little hyperactive. And what I love is walking the stage, using my arms, jumping down, talking to people, getting right in their face. And they were like, no, 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 that's not how we do it at TED. You're going to stay right there. I was like, ah. So, I think I love to energize audiences and engage them. I was doing a talk in Orlando, just like 125 women. It was a dinner talk, and they were like, we feel really badly. We don't have a podium for you. I said, great. That's the
Yeah.
last thing I want is a podium. I want to get right knee to knee, face to face, and hear their problems. And I that brings me a lot of joy. And I find when I do my talks, it empowers them. I hear from a lot of women after saying, I've gone to a lot of these menopause talks, but this was one where I felt
Yeah.
you really get me. So that's where I'd like to develop a little more. But yeah, the brand is, I hope, somewhat humorous, irreverent, but evidence-based clinician who really wants you to get the best life you can get. I do longevity work as well. And this
Mhm.
is because a few years ago, I was contacted by a colleague, Dr. Paul Grewal, Grewal. He's amazing. And he runs a longevity practice in New York and London. And he was Peter Attia's kind of first mate or whatever. So really high level stuff. And he asked me to be the women's health part of his practice. So that has swept me into understanding the importance of menopause care as the beginning for many women of a reset, of looking at their next 30, 35 years. So in my virtual practice, that's what we do. Women will come for menopause, but they stay for the longevity. We end up really going through everything with them. And that's been phenomenal to really help women look ahead. Noom is a great app that I've used, but now I spoke last week at Noom's Summit for Aging and Wellness, and that's kind of really exciting to me that women are getting the opportunity to think not just how do I get through menopause, but how do I view menopause as the beginning of a window towards long-term health so that Alyssa, Rachel, and I are actually on stand-up paddle boards at 75 talking about our grandkids or whatever it is. Like I don't want to be in a rocking chair. I'm too hyper, and I want that for my patients and my friends and colleagues.
So before
So
we let you go, for people who have had the chance to um, see you speak and want more, people who are learning about you for the first time and want to get some of the Dr. Sophocles wisdom, when is the book coming out?
the book is out February 10th. It's available now if you go to Amazon for pre-order, or if you go to my website, Maria Sophocles MD, you can see all the different ways to pre-order it because we don't just do Amazon. And I'm really excited. February and March will be a big book tour all over the country, so it'll be fun to
Amazing.
connect with friends and colleagues through that. And then the Hot documentary is going to be out. We don't know when it's out. We're still filming, so it's probably a fall. This fall we'll begin to look at which film festivals we'll be working with. But that'll be sort of just a funny, irreverent, but also poignant look at the sexual journey that we all go through from different women. I think that'll be fun too. Thank
Yeah.
you guys so much for having
Well,
me
thank
on.
you. I mean,
You're welcome. We
from
can't
me,
wait.
not just from the podcast, but from me as a human being, thank you. I so love doing this podcast with Alyssa because she also brings this very unique lens. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to sort of make this all okay. In different ways, the three of us have been pushing this boulder uphill for a long time, and I'm so
Yes.
thrilled with the breakthrough with your documentary and the book
Yeah.
and the Dr. Sophocles brand. So thank you so much for all the work you do.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.